it's Anna. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my May wrap-up, and I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of May. May was not the greatest reading month for me. I still managed to complete 4 books, which was just under 1900 pages, but I didn't read as much as I wanted to, and I didn't read everything that was on my TBR. I felt like in May I was in and out of the reading slump. I think a part of it is because in April I was taking part in the Hours Readathon, which was a month-long readathon, and I read so much in April that I kind of had to take a break from reading in May. But I've also been reading so much fantasy, and I know from past experience that if I stick to one genre for too long, then even though I may be enjoying the books that I'm reading, I still get really slumpy, and especially when it comes to high fantasy and stuff like that. So probably it was my fault, but it doesn't matter. I still managed to complete 4 books, so I am on track when it comes to reading 52 books this year. But without further ado, let's get into talking about the books that I read. So the first book that I read in May was the second Harry Potter, so The Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. I absolutely love Harry Potter, and I enjoy this book more than the first one, which was surprising to me. I remember that it was the other way around when I was reading it the first time, but even when it comes to the movies, the first one was always kind of my favorite one, and second one was more at the bottom of my favorites, because they're all my favorites, but it was still one of my least favorites out of all of them. And this time around, I really loved it. I absolutely adored the time that Harry spends with the Weasleys. In general, the world expands so much in this book, and it's such a short book as well. I'm impressed that J.K. Rowling can build so much world within 200 pages of the first book and then another 200 pages of the second book. And we got to see the magical world from a different perspective, from a perspective of a wizard's family, which was great. We experienced different ways of travel, which in general, there were so many new things added to the world and to the story. I loved it. And also Lockhart, absolutely my favorite character in this book. He's the king. Obviously, if I were a Hogwarts student, I would probably be freaking annoyed by him, but to read and to see his character in action and just the way he thinks is hilarious. I was laughing out loud whenever I was reading this story. It's just such a great character to add to this story. Well, I don't know, the story itself, I can't say much. Obviously, this was a reread for me, so I knew what I'm getting into. Plot-wise, there was not really anything surprising for me because I know the story so well. But also what I really enjoyed is just being there with the characters, just being there, talk with each other and interact with each other. They all have such a great chemistry, and it's just amazing. Also, Lucius Malfoy, really love this guy. I mean, I don't love him as a person. I think he's a bully and it's just a horrible father. But he is a great character, and the way he treats Draco, we kind of sympathize with Draco, and we kind of start to understand why Draco is such a bully himself, because this is what he's been experiencing all his life from his father. Honestly, I'm enjoying this reread so much, and I couldn't be happier to be back in Hogwarts and with these characters again. It's just magical. Okay, the next book that I completed in the month of May was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I'm not gonna talk too much about this book in here because I've got a dedicated book review for that book available on my channel, so I'll just link it up here for you guys if you're interested to know my in-depth thoughts. But I was kind of underwhelmed by this book. I know so many people love this series in general, and obviously I haven't continued with the series yet, but I'm planning to continue. This first book felt short for me in some aspects. I think that the idea for the world was so interesting, but V.E. Schwab didn't really build or expand this world enough for me, or for my liking at least. Well, I hope that in the second and the third book we're gonna get so much more explanation and so much more expansion for this world, because it's so interesting. I just realized I haven't said what this book is about, but essentially this book is set in the world where there are 4 different Londons. There's Black London, Red London, White London, and Grey London. Grey London is essentially our regular London without magic. Red London is the place with magic, when people are controlling magic. White London is a place where people are fighting over control over magic, but magic is kind of fighting back. There's a lot of sadness, anger, and in general aggression in there. And then Black London doesn't exist anymore, because that is the place where magic overtook the control and destroyed that city. We're following Kelsey is a different book. We follow Kel, who is originally from the Red London, and he's one of the 2 people who are able to travel between the Londons. So he acts as a messenger between the different Londons, and the story starts as he smuggles something from one of the Londons back to his Red London, something that he was not supposed to smuggle, and that's how the story starts. It sounded super interesting, and as much as I love the characters, I think Kale was interesting as a character, and also Lila was a super interesting character. But when it comes to world building and the plot, this book felt a little short for me. So if you're interested in hearing my in-depth thoughts, just go and watch that other video of mine in which I talk more specifically about the things I did and didn't like. In the end, I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. The third book I finished in May was a new release, and it was a very anticipated release, and it was Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Susan Collins. This book I also have a dedicated spoiler-free and spoiler-full review for, because when I finished reading this I had many thoughts in my head. Basically, the story is set in the Hunger Games world, but it takes place 64 years before the original trilogy. We are following the young President Snow, who's obviously not a president yet. He is a mentor in the 10th Hunger Games, and that's all you need to know for now about this plot. I thought this book was really boring. I enjoyed the first part of this book, where we find out the reasons behind the Hunger Games in general. We see the capital and the life in the capital, and we learn about the history of the Hunger Games, and we see how the games evolved. And in general, for me, it was a great companion to the Hunger Games, the first, let's say, 150, 200 pages. But then from then it goes downhill, and then we get to the actual Hunger Games, which was super disappointing for me, because we see them from the perspective of the mentors. We really don't care for the tributes that are in there, which was the most important part in the original trilogy. And then the romance, first of all, didn't care for, and second of all, it was written in such a cheesy way that I really didn't enjoy. I'm not gonna say much more about this book, why I didn't like it, but if you want to hear my in-depth thoughts about this book, just go in and watch my dedicated book review for this book, because especially the spoilery section, it's a rant. It's always entertaining to watch something like that, right? In general, very disappointed with this prequel. I think it is not gonna be a standalone. I think we're gonna have a whole new trilogy based around President Snow, and I'm really not sure if I'm gonna be picking up any more of these books. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars just because of the first beginning bit when we learn about the Hunger Games. Everything else for me was really disappointing and really not up to the Hunger Games trilogy level. And finally, a book that I've been reading on and off for about 3 weeks in May. It's A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. It's A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I finished reading it at nighttime, just before bed, on the 31st of May, and honestly, for the past few days I was not really able to think about anything else than this book and these characters, and I still feel unsure about how I'm supposed to rate this book. Essentially, we are following 4 friends who live in New York City. Basically, there's not really a clear plot in this book. They follow their lives, the regular, ordinary lives, from the moment that they moved to New York City after finishing university up to the present day. I'm saying 4 friends. There's Jude, Willem, Malcolm, and JB, but this story is essentially Jude's story. From the very beginning of this story, the first few pages, you know that Jude has been through some crap in his life, but we don't know what it is. So we are following these 4 friends, and as the years go by, we're learning about Jude's traumatic past. This is a very difficult book to read. This is probably the most depressing book that I've ever read in my entire life, but the way it was written, it's really amazing. Obviously, this book is a chunker. Yana Gihara was able to retain my attention throughout these 700 plus pages, and it is essentially a character study of a person who has lived through some traumatic events and how this trauma is affecting his life even years after these events happened. I get really even emotional when I think about everything that happened in there. It took me about 100 pages to get connected with these characters, but then once you do get connected, you start caring for them. This is a contemporary book, so it is set in a real world. These are real people with real problems. So you get really attached to these people and you can see yourself in their position. You can see that things that happen in this book can and are happening in a real world. And you see how horrible the world is. But also, I don't think this book was meant to be depressing per se, because as much as I think about the ending and as much as it was heartbreaking to read, it was not all that negative. I don't want to say any spoilers, but if you did read it, let me know in the comments if this is something that you think the same. Obviously, I was really emotional by the end of this story. It's been a long time since I cried over a book. I honestly don't remember the last time I cried. When I was younger, I was more inclined to cry during reading, but now not as much. I mean, I do get emotional, but not really actual real tears. But I was sobbing. Honestly, I couldn't stop sobbing, and I wasn't even able to read the ending because I was crying so much. But if you think about the ending in general, it has some positive aspects as well. So it's not all that depressing in the end if you look at it as a whole. I really love the characters in this book, and my all-time favorite characters in here are Willem and Harold. You just learn to love these characters because they care so much and they just generally good people. Up to about a day ago, I was still not sure about how to rate this book because there is so much pain in there and very little happiness. So technically, when you read it, you don't feel pure joy from reading it. But I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The only reason I didn't give it 5 out of 5 was that Jude's past, it feels like it was overcolored, and the amount of trauma that was put on this little boy, it was enormous. Obviously, Yana Gihara, she was going for the shock aspect, but still it felt kind of unrealistic. Of course, I'm not saying that whatever happened to Jude is not happening or has never happened, or the people can't have multiple traumas in their lives, but it just felt like so much, and maybe it's just me, that at some point I was just not able to take any more of this trauma. Not that I was not caring about it, but it felt like, okay, yet another thing to add to this. And I don't know, I can't really voice my opinions on this book. Maybe in a couple of weeks, couple of months, I will be able to. It is a really good book. It is difficult, it's hard to read, it's devastating, but it also means so much and is so important to read, or at least it was for me. So yeah, 4 out of 5 stars for A Little Life. For now, at least. I may change my star rating later on in the year. For now, 4 out of 5 stars. Really great book. And definitely, if you think that you can handle it, definitely go and check it out. because it's really worth it. Okay guys, so these are all 4 books that I read in the month of May. Let me know in the comments below what books you managed to read last month. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for some more bookish content. Thank you very much for watching today, and I hope to see you again with another video soon. Bye!